Hey guys, today we will learn how to play against London system. It is super popular nowadays because it doesn't require specific opening knowledge. You just put your pieces on specific positions and reflect to opponent's setup. It is very solid but has some loopholes. Let's begin. d4, d5 and knight f3. Knight f6, bishop f4. This is London system. There is also another way to play London, which is bishop f4. This is called modern London. The idea is to delay knight f3 and quickly play e3, c3 and knight goes to d2 in the positions before knight goes to f3. So let's take a look at the difference. London overall is a very positional opening with idea to attack on the king side. So their setup is they put their pawn here, knight here, bishop here, pawn here, knight here, they castle, and they put knight on e5. That is their setup. This is a London system. I myself played London system when I was about 2200 until I was like 2300. Maybe I played like 20 games. Sometimes when I feel like I don't want to play openings, I just want to play positional chess. And sometimes if I feel like my opponent doesn't know how to play precisely against London. So that's when I played London. I always played with knight f3, knight f6, bishop f4, this type of London. And I will show you why. So for example, bishop f4. Anytime they go bishop f4, the simple rule, we hit with c5. If they go knight f3, knight f6, bishop f4, we again hit with c5. There are many ways to play against London. For example, there's like e6, there's bishop f5, there's c6, even maybe knight d7 or g6. Many ways, but we're going to play with c5 move. So d5, d4, bishop f4, let's start with the modern London. c5, e3. They can also play c3, but it just transposes. I don't see any difference. Here they should play knight f3. And if they play knight bd2, I will show you what to do in the main line with bishop f5. So here, this is basically transposes to the main line, which we're going to cover. But first, let's go to the e3, knight f6, c3, and knight c6. So we always want to get this position, and I will not touch knight f3 because it's a London system, so we're going to play knight bd2 first. That prevents us to go queen b6. Because now, if we go queen b6, they go queen b3, and after c4, they go queen c2, and we don't have bishop f5 because they take. And if I take, I cannot take the rook, because rook can move away. Normally with a knight on b1 and knight on f3, black wins, but right now they don't win. So that's a little trick that white wants to do on us, but we're not going to play queen b6. We will of course go bishop f5, and that prevents bishop d3. Opponent will most likely play knight f3, and then we go e6, bishop e2, h6, and we get this beautiful setup when white have absolutely nothing. They don't even have to take, they can play knight e5, but they don't have any follow-up. They can play rook c8. So, again, this is not a critical line when they go bishop e2. I'm just going to show you what happens in this position if they go like this. It's just equal plus. Now, the critical move is, of course, not knight f3, is queen b3. So what they can get out of this? Now, queen b6 is not that good because of d takes c5. That's why we play queen d7. So they go knight f3. Ideally, they want to play bishop b5 and knight e5. We will prevent their plans, and we will play c4 now. This is a very important move to push the pawn right now. Queen goes to d1, and now we go e6. So now, main line is bishop e2, which I don't see anything good about this. After, for example, bishop e7, knight e5, we trade, we play h6, g4, bishop g6, h4, and b5. Again, black is better. There's little improvement with this h6, because if I would castle, then g4 here and h4, they have an attack. But with this brilliant waiting move, we're improving our position, and we now not going to castle because they want to attack us on this side, so we're just going to play a5 and b4. And again, this bishop e2 is maybe not the best move because it's main line, but knight h4, in my opinion, is the best variation, which actually gives white an equality. So after, let's say, we go bishop e4, they have this weird bishop g5 type move. And after bishop e7, take, and they take on e4. We take h4, they have this queen g4. Very weird, but very strong move. And we don't have anything better than just this type of position. It's equal at most for black, but it's also at most equal for white, I think. Trade this type of endgame. I don't want you to play this endgame. In fact, I would rather you to play, instead of bishop e4, bishop e7. Much better move. So they take f5, we take f5. We control over e4, very strong control. We don't have this light square bishop because all our pawns are on the light squares. b3, we play b5. And we're about to castle and play a6 if a4. But if they go a4 immediately, b4 and we punish them. Believe it or not, black is better. So if they take here, bishop takes b4, just basically wins because knight e4 is too strong, they cannot take. And if they take b takes c4, which is their best move, then we go take on c3. Knight f3 and we take c4. Take, castle. If they attack our pawn, we always go knight e4. So this position is slightly preferable for black. That's why this knight h4 is only promising if we go with the main move bishop e4, but the research I made with bishop e7 I think gives black some slight advantage here. Here we're doing well. We basically see that white doesn't really benefit much from this modern London of developing bishop on f4 when we play c5 immediately. One line I have to show you, this line, in the queen b3, queen d7, now I showed you knight f3, but didn't show you d takes c5. Interesting move also, e5, bishop g3. Some people play it like this. We take on c5, they go knight f3, attacking e5. Now queen c7 is almost a novelty, but I think a couple games was played like this. It's a computer move, probably only one game. The idea after bishop b5, we go bishop d6, defending the pawn on e5. And after c4, we just castle. Amazing move. Now white have to go critical to take the pawn, and we have knight a5. Beautiful. Queen a4 and bishop c2. This is a computer analysis. b3, a6. White is already clearly worse. Bishop e2, knight takes d5, and if rook c1, beautiful move, bishop b4. The idea of this move, we want to take on b3, and knight cannot take because it's pinned. And that's tactical trick they cannot actually prevent. So even if they go bishop takes e5, we still go this very, very weird and unusual bishop takes b3. Take, whatever move, black is just clearly better here. We are threatening moves like rook here, knight takes, rook d8, then just a bad position. That variation I showed. And there's one more line. Very early here, when we play c5, we need to look at some deviations. So when they go e3, knight f6, for example, this move knight c3. And some books and maybe some video courses, they suggest this move. This is how Jobava Badur plays, and Magnus Carlsen himself played this move knight c3. Of course, you have to be careful now. Knight b5 is a threat, but the best variation is c takes d4. So e takes d4. If knight b5, we just give check, and after c3, we can even take. This knight d8 is not a big deal because of king d8, and white have to prevent move like c takes b2. The only move is like a miracle b4, which we have to take, and after knight takes a8, we give this check, they go queen d2, and it all goes to a draw with a very weird line, e5. We're defending the queen. If bishop takes, queen b1 check, queen c1, and just we cannot win this position. After queen b4 check, they have to go queen d2, because if they go here, this is obviously losing, as we have a forced checkmate in 4 moves, I think. Check, can go here, because queen g4 checkmate, king here, bishop b4, and after this, you know, it's a mate. So yeah, that's a draw. Knight b5, also maybe there's move knight a6, but no one plays knight b5 after take. Of course, they all take, and we play a6. Basically, we're playing against this knight. Bishop d3 is the best move to prevent bishop f5. In that case, knight c6. We want them to go knight f3. In that case, we go bishop g4, and black is slightly better, but they have knight e2. We still have to develop the bishop to g4. f3, of course, pawn was hanging. We move away. g4 is the best. Bishop g6, h4, e6. They go h5, take. They develop their queen with tempo on d3. And this is a very interesting position where computer shows this equality, but somehow maybe it's preferable with black. h6 long castle, rook c8, king b1, bishop e7. Few games were played like this. In this position is a really double-edged position, but of course with moves like b5, black is going to play on this side, and this attack should be stopped, and this is the only thing they can do is to play g5. As I told you before, Jobava Badur plays these positions. I'm going to show you database here. So you see Jobava Badur plays this with white, and Carlsen himself played this position too, but I think Carlsen played, instead of knight g2, Carlsen played knight c e2. Let's take a look. So this was the Carlsen move, and he beat a Grandmaster Bok. If you want to know what to play against this, let's quickly take a look with engine. What's the engine's best response? Bishop g4 was played in the Carlsen game, but perhaps queen b6 was the best move, immediately attacking this pawn, and maybe white sacrificing a pawn like this. Queen takes b2, they develop. Queen a3, castle probably is the best. e6, and now white have to prove what they sacrifice their pawn for. Queen c2, bishop e7. I think I'm totally fine to play this position with black. Okay, this is modern London. Again, some people play like this, but I don't see that much. Of course, we're going to see the main point, the whole idea here in knight f3. This is much more interesting than immediate bishop f4, so let's take a look. Knight f6, now we are in the main line, bishop f4, and again, we hit with c5. Opponent can do either c3 or e3. There are some differences. For example, if e3, we always want to get towards this position, yes, with the queen b6. But if the c3, it gives them extra option to play, let's say, knight c6. Some people maybe will play d takes c5. Again, e3 just transposes. So d takes c5, and here's how we should play against it. We should play e6, attacking the pawn. Of course, b4, and a5 is extremely strong. You can't defend it with a3, and you can't even defend it with queen b3. This is just a bad move. We just take the pawn, take here, and we play like knight e4. And the threat is queen f6 is just too strong. This position is not good for white. And we'll have a similar position where I show you how to handle this. It is, instead of c3, immediate d takes c5. So here we go after a5, b5, and knight e7, and this position is pretty bad for white because we have a threat knight g6, attacking the bishop and pawn on c5. And there's no good move. For example, if we just play e3, we just go knight g6. And this pawn falls, this position is awkward. If white plays instead, for example, something like bishop d6, then of course we have that very powerful move, knight e4. And what is this bishop doing on d6? Nobody knows. Okay, so c3, not a big deal. It's just going to transpose if your opponent chooses c3 to e3. Let's remember that. And let's see what happens if they take immediately. We play e6, attacking this pawn. And we're going to play a very similar variation to what we have. If the b4, a5. c3, we just take. Take, and again knight c6. Uncomfortable to defend this pawn. Queen d2, knight e4. Black just wins. And if queen b3, again, let me show you the end how this works. So we threaten queen f6, knight c3, pin, bishop d2, beautiful knight takes b4, and this is how it works as a combination, that bishop takes c5, attacking the queen. Also, just to be clear, this is never possible for knight takes e4 because queen takes a1, taking the rook with check, and if they take, we go bishop takes c5, queen moves away, bishop takes check, king d1, and just castle position is pretty terrible here for white. They can even try e3, rook d8. I tried this best moves. And 2 pawns right now, and super weak king, crazy attack, completely losing position. Even here, white is up a whole piece just for a pawn, but they cannot withstand the attack because of this all moves, rook c8, knight c4, and queen g5. And again, this is just going to be completely lost. It's like -3 position or -4. So let's go to e3 and knight c6. And we want to finally transpose to this main line of London with c3. Just before, what else they have? If knight c3, bishop g4, and knight b5 never works because of rook c8. So knight is completely misplaced here. It's not even the move. If knight bd2, probably the best way to play London system I wrote. Again, absolutely not explored, but it's just a good way to play London. If black do choose this, they have to settle for that. But people never want to settle for that. They want to play c3, queen b3. And let's see how black should respond. They should take. Take and bishop f5. e3, e6, queen b3. And there are some difficulties with defending this pawn, so we have to go queen c8, and they hunt for the bishop. Bishop e4 is the best. Take, pawn takes. It's a very strong move. h6 is a big threat, because if we play h6 in this position, then g5 is winning. So we take, they go g3, because they need to go knight g2. Bishop e7, knight g2. Knight d5 attacking the bishop, bishop d2. And after castle, bishop e2, rook d8, castle, rook b8. I put equality, but I also said white could be slightly better. Again, it's absolutely unexplored knight b2, and I think people should play like this. That's even maybe not even called London anymore, because this is how they always want to play this. But if something like this is played, is pretty interesting. There's another way we can play. We can play with queen b6 and completely stop all the plans. In that case, they should take, rook b1, and queen c3. I do like this position too, but there's a super precise move for white. We get in some slight problems here because of this variation I'm showing to you. Again, I don't want you to remember that because it's all computer moves, and it's also plus equal. So knight bd2 is pretty much the future, should be played, and we should play this position, which is still equal. I just don't know why I put white is better, because I like two bishops here, but technically it's equal. So knight c6, c3. Finally, we reach the most important position where white wants to just play bishop d3 and just knight d2 and be happy and play their London, but no, they cannot do this because we have this queen b6. This is the most annoying way to play against London, and the problem is this is the weakness on b2, and we immediately attack this pawn. So now, if they play like queen c1 defending this pawn, we're just beautifully defending our pieces, putting pawn e6 and following up with rook c8. Look at this amazing position, no problems at all. Knight h4 not even working because pawn is hanging on d4 because of queen on c1. So they take, and then this, but this position is already bad. So let's go to the main line. Queen b3. Of course, we're pushing c4. That's our whole point. And now it's unpleasant choice of where to go, queen c2 or queen takes b6. If they go queen takes b6, a takes b6, I always want you to assure that this position is absolutely amazing for black, because we want to play b5, b4, and we will create a weakness on c3. And there's no way white can prevent that. For example, they have this move knight a3, which should be probably the main line, and that prevents b5. But you know, it was recently discovered that the knight a7 is such a strong move, it prevents this move, and still we're threatening to play b5. And let's take a look what happens. If bishop e2, bishop f5, I'm already preventing knight c2. You immediately have to go knight h4 because I was about to attack your knight with e6. So knight h4, I go bishop d7, I win the tempo. Now, you could go back, but I'm up a tempo with bishop d7. So if here h6, again forcing g5, so you have to go back. Bishop f5 back, attacking knight, bishop d1, and e6. Beautiful position. I will play b5, I will play back knight c6, and I'll play b4. So black will be better. So knight a3 is not a big deal. They have normal move, let's say knight d2, in this case we push b5, and immediately b4. Even if they go a3, we still must push b4, because rook was about to leave. So I have to play b4, we're using this pin on a1. If they take, they should, we take with knight, fork is threatened, and they go rook c1. Now we just withdraw our knight back. They develop, we will develop. They will castle, we will play like e6. Now the problem is they cannot push this pawn because of this weakness on a3. Their position is not good. Ideally, if black could just get all these moves, of course they'll be just winning here. Bad position. Let us get back to this variation where we stopped after b5. And now, instead of a3, when I showed you b4, they should play bishop e2, a main line. And now we go b4. We want to create a weakness here. Castle, bishop f5. If take, we just take with knight, knight e5, e6. And this g4. What I'm showing you is absolutely the best way for white. I don't think anyone knows this, because if person goes and plays this variation and goes into the b6, he never plans to play all this brilliant move like this, just to have prepared against you this g4, like this. It's a coincidence for him that you played bishop f5 and knight c6 and b4, and he will never figure out this best move g4, but it's really strong. So after knight takes e5, takes f5, we go back, take, and this a3. Again, a computer move, and I wrote this is a super precise way of playing to achieve equality, but only computers can play like that. Then we take, b5, and unfortunately, we have to force a draw like this. But again, forget about this. There's a draw for them if they go like that. And again, we could have played also a little bit different if we want. We didn't have to, for example, in this position, go for this immediate b4. We could play maybe bishop f5 first to confuse them, or even here knight e5. Maybe there are better moves. For example, instead of e6, I also like take the pawn, take, and rook a3 immediately. And they cannot attack the b7 with rook b1 because there's a bishop here. So this is also another way of playing. Let's see evaluation here. Probably we should be slightly tiny better. They always have this g4, which is the best, but as the computer now shows, we have somehow this g5, and black is better. Well, this is amazing. We can just leave this as a better option for us. Let's do alt up and promote that line. Okay, we're done with queen takes b6. Now let's go to queen c2. So queen c2, of course, bishop f5. This is the whole beauty of that move. I want to show you something. Why we play knight c6 first, for example? Why wouldn't we play against, let's say, c3 variation? Something like queen b6 immediately. The problem here, after queen b3, let's say, c4, queen c2, bishop f5 doesn't work. Because take, and a mate, all of a sudden. So be careful, you have to have both of your knights here. Another way we could have done, for example, in a modern way, c5, c3, knight c6, knight f3, and now queen b6, queen b3, c4, here, bishop f5. Now we don't have this knight here, but we have another knight. But it's still not recommended, because they can still take d5, take a1, and they have this very strong move, queen b5, defending this pawn. And best move here is a6, queen takes b7, and knight d8. After which queen e4 is the best move, and there are some difficulties. But here, black could also go long castle in a crazy line. But again, there's nothing better than equality. So don't do this. Just try to have both of your knights out before you play queen b6. Once your two knights out, then go queen b6. Simple rule. Queen b3, c4, queen c2, bishop f5. So now we are attacking queen on c2. It has to leave. Again, no way they can take, because queen takes b2 just wins for black. Bishop f5, queen c1, and e6 will now beautifully develop. Knight bd2, h6, h3, bishop e7. Nothing else white can do. They develop, we develop. They castle, and this is an important moment. After everything is developed, what to do next? This is a pure London right now. There is a beautiful system. Is rook comes here, queen goes there, then we push b5, a5, b4. That's our plan. But what white can do against that? So if you're playing against a super knowledgeable player, he needs to understand, he needs to trade these guys. And we will assume he will do that. Bishop d1, we go queen d8. They go bishop c2, b5. Guys, do not take this bishop, because queen takes and e4 is extremely strong. Just play b5. So they go rook e1 to push e4. Taking is nothing. We just take and they can never push e4. So they play rook e1. They insist on e4, and we push b4 a little bit faster than them. e4, that's the most critical. Knight e5 is another way of playing. In that case, I like a5. a3 again, I'm just going to show you a computer line that I don't believe is ever going to happen. Knight d7 here, and b3 here, and f5. This is equal position, but if they play e4 prematurely, they're worse, because here, and queen g5 after rook moves. Very, very good position for black. I don't believe in knight e5. I think they will play e4. In that case, we take on e4. They take. And we go knight d5. Very important detail. We actually attack this bishop. Bishop goes to d2 to defend c3. And we go rook b8. We're applying more pressure. Knight g3. We take c3 is the best. Take c3. And I have this variation of bishop d3, but bishop a3 is slightly better. Attacking the queen. Take, and bishop takes c2. and then queen c1, bishop g6, and I start right here. This position never happened before, but this is absolutely the best London for black that is out there, and this is what I recommend to you to play. There's so much stuff with these different London people try to play, you know, with this e6, I don't understand why, with the bishop f5, I don't understand why. Pure, so much better to play c5, and black is just either at least equal or better. So that's how we do it, and we only have now how to play against Tora attack and against Kohler's system, and then we'll be done with the whole against d4. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.